So there I was, 40 grand in debt, frustrated, anxious, broke. George's plan hasn't worked thus far. Let me try this proven plan of the 7 baby steps. I mean, your bank account really is a reflection of your life, who you are now and where you're going. I had followed the path that a lot of people follow. Get good grades in school, work hard, get into a good college. They don't tell you at the end of that you're going to be strapped with debt payments.
Got it. We're going to interview George Kamel.
You are a personal finance expert.
He's a millionaire investor.
He's the co-host on the Ramsey show.
Went from a negative net worth to millionaire in less than 10 years.
And I found that there's 3 stooges of wealth building. It's fear, greed, and pride.
Do you believe in good debt at all? And what is the difference between good debt and bad debt?
My controversial take is that
Boom. George, thanks so much for making the show.
Absolutely, Sean. Thanks for having me.
Congrats on your book as well, Breaking Free from Broke, the ultimate guide to making more money and less stress. I was taking a look at your story. I think the one that stands out that maybe a lot of people can relate to is that 10-year span where you went from, I think like a 40,000 consumer debt that you had to paying it off. Now you're a debt-free millionaire. Tell us about the baby steps. The 7 baby steps, I believe that they're called, just to summarize it on how that was so impactful for you to go from, a stressed out, someone that had a lot of debt to thriving financially now and teaching other people on how to do it.
Yeah, I was the average millennial. I had $36,000 in student loan debt. I had $4,000 in credit card debt. And I had followed the path that a lot of people follow. Get good grades in school, work hard, get into a good college, go to the school of your dreams, get the degree, and life will be great. Well, they don't tell you at the end of that you're going to be strapped with debt payments if you do it the normal sort of American way. And so there I was, 40 grand in debt, frustrated, anxious, broke, in my first full-time job working for a guy named Dave Ramsey. And, he coined these baby steps. He didn't invent the idea of debt freedom, but he looked at God's and grandma's ways of handling money after he went bankrupt back in the 80s, and he climbed back out to become a millionaire again. And so I went, you know what? George's plan hasn't worked thus far. Let me try this proven plan of the 7 baby steps, Financial Peace University, total money makeover. And the baby steps are really simple, and they center around becoming debt-free, staying debt-free, and investing consistently. That's really the hallmark of the plan. So baby step 1 is a $1,000 starter emergency fund. You got to have a little buffer between you and life so that you don't get knocked off the wagon during your debt payoff journey. So once you have $1,000, you move on to baby step 2, which is paying off all of your consumer debt, everything except the mortgage, using the debt snowball method. So that's smallest to largest balance, ignoring the interest rate, attack the little one with a vengeance, roll that payment into the next one, and it picks up snow. Once you're completely debt-free, baby step 3 is a fully funded emergency fund of 3 to 6 months of expenses. So we go back to that emergency fund, keep stacking on top of that until we have that 3 to 6 months of expenses. Then we start investing. Baby step 4, invest 15% of your income into retirement. And at the same time, we're going to start putting away money for the college fund if you have kids. And at the same time, if you have any extra money, throw it at the mortgage and attack that mortgage to become completely debt-free, no payments in the world, which leads you to baby step 7, which is sort of this choose your own adventure where you get to build wealth and give generously and upgrade your lifestyle and invest even more. And that really has created a wealthy, rich life in so many ways, even beyond money.
Which of these baby steps do you think most people get stuck on? The one that they find is not such a baby step, but something that they're mentally or just financially unable to overcome unless there's some significant event in their life, or it may take many years for them to really overcome.
Yeah, I think baby step 2 has the deepest sacrifice. Baby step 1, $1,000, we can all pretty much scrape together $1,000 if we had to in a short amount of time. Baby step 2 takes a much bigger paradigm shift where you decide, I'm done with debt. We call this the I've had it moment, where you need to have a deep why as to why you actually want to get out of debt. Otherwise, you're going to end up right back where you are. And to me, that is a real pinnacle moment where you can say, I'm done. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get out. Even if that's selling the car that has a giant payment on it. Or some people even sell their house because it's a real drastic situation. It might mean getting that side hustle or that second job cutting down the budget, not eating out anymore, kind of scorched earth, rice and beans, as Dave calls it. And that to me is the hardest one because it's probably the biggest transformation where you go, I've been living beyond my means. Now I need to live way less than my means. And that to me is kind of the biggest spectrum that you've got to shift. Because beyond that, saving the emergency fund, it's boring and it's slow. It's not exciting. Investing 15% feels good. You're building for the future. Paying off the house, while maybe the longest time needed to do that, it's not a 2-year process for most people. It still feels like you have some margin now because you've been out of debt. You have an emergency fund. Life is easier. But that period where you're getting out of debt and you have $1,000 in the bank, you feel it. You feel it in your spirit and in your bones. And to me, that's the most inspiring journey, is that debt-free journey where you finally become debt-free for the first time in your adult life.
Yeah, so just to back up, we're going to go back to this, but I want to talk about more of the philosophy and kind of the idea of money that people have, particularly around the status of being a millionaire. So from the stats that I found right now, there's about 25 millionaires in the US today. And it seems like for years and decades, this has always been this goal that we've had from as long as I can remember, certainly, but I'm sure back in our grandpa day, my grandparents were also thinking about this fixated idea of a millionaire. But the idea of $1 million is not actually $1 million because of inflation. And I actually did a calculation around this that $1 million in the 1970s is about $8 million today, meaning it's just nowhere near what it was before. So the reality is, like, most people are aiming for this goal, but it's actually a goalpost that just is going to continue moving. So what is a worthy goal from a financial perspective, instead of just trying to go for the status of being a millionaire for the sake of it because of how media has been portrayed it? What's a worthy financial goal that people should be setting?
Yeah, that's a great question. You're right. Becoming a millionaire is more of a milestone now than a goal. And for some people, it feels hopeless. They feel like they'll never even get there. And when we're talking about millionaire, let's define it. We're talking about net worth of $1 million, which means you don't have to make $1 million a year. You don't need to have $1 million cash in a bank account even. That's a cash millionaire. What we're talking about here is your assets minus liabilities equals $1 million. And so if your home is paid off and it's worth $500,000 and you have another $500,000 in your retirement accounts, you, by all definitions, are an actual millionaire. Now, that doesn't mean that you're able to retire. Doesn't mean you're going to go buy a private jet. The millionaires that we've studied, they live very normal lives, and I'm one of them. I don't have a crazy, flashy lifestyle. I still got to pay bills and go to work. I can't retire today, but that doesn't need to be the goal. I think too many people have conflated the idea of millionaire with this idea that my life is perfect and I don't have to do anything anymore. And you're right, it's a moving goalpost because of inflation. So I think a better financial goal is to think about what the next 5-10 years looks like for you. Can I accomplish my realistic goals and dreams? Can I go on the vacation that I want? Can we pay for the repairs in cash? Can we upgrade the car when we want to? Those are the types of goals that I think are more attainable and actually reflect the reality of our human experience. We go to work, we want to enjoy life, we want to have some nice things, we want to have some great experiences. And beyond that, I don't think we need to be so worried about some magic number that's going to give us happiness, because we know from studies, from celebrities, that does not exist. Now, there is a number where you can say my assets create enough that I don't need to work anymore. That's a great goal to have. That's a much better scoreboard. But I think the obsession over a certain number that's going to magically solve our life's problems, we need to put that down.
Yeah, it seems the goalpost is also only going to keep moving as, with inflation. And even if you were to reach that $1 million status, you're now going to be surrounded by other people that are making that much or have that kind of lifestyle. And it's kind of keeping up with the Joneses, right? So how have you, or how would you advise people to avoid that mentality of continuing to upgrade your lifestyle? It's hard, from a social perspective, when someone has a certain car that you like and you are still driving a Honda Accord, you're like, maybe I could like it a little bit. But how do we set up frameworks and systems or questions that we can ask ourselves so that while we raise our net worth and increase our income and wealth, that we're not eradicating all of it because we have crazy expenses that we have to keep up with.
Yeah, I think it starts with a healthy view of yourself, a healthy view of your worldview and the contentment that you have for where you are in life. And most people, when they don't really know who they are and what their purpose is, and they're sort of just floating, all they have is the scoreboard of a net worth or a certain income or a certain lifestyle and status. And what we found is as those people make more, they just spend more. And that's why we call it lifestyle creep. Their lifestyle creeps up to meet their new income. And all of a sudden they go, I don't have that much money left over. What's happening? I make good money. I make more than I ever have. And yet it feels like it's disappearing. And they blame things like the economy and inflation and who knows what else. But at the end of the day, if you can learn to live on less than you make and you're doing a budget, just an intentional spending plan, you have no debt and you're investing for the future, I found that that brings what we call financial peace into your life. When you have financial peace, you're content with where you're at. You're not striving, so aggressively to keep up with someone else. Because I found as you try to run someone else's race, there is no finish line. That's the moving goalpost that you mentioned. So I think it starts with having a really healthy view of what your goals are, what your values are, the kind of person you want to be. That's a much better thing to focus on than whatever the next net worth target is. Because like you mentioned, you become, you kind of become who you hang around, and that can be a good thing. We want to hang around people who are successful, who care about their goals, but it can also become toxic when it's, oh, I only have 2 million and my buddy, he has 4 million. And so that needs to be my next thing. It's an empty chase at the end of the day. And so I'd rather people focus on, am I living the life currently that I want to live? Am I taking the right steps toward a healthy goal that's based on who I want to be, what I want for my family versus what other people are doing? That's how you know you're headed in the right direction.
Yeah, talk to me a little bit more about that. This idea of separating your self-worth with your net worth. How do we go about that? I was actually having I think 2 podcasts ago, I had Vivian Tu on from your Rich BFF.
Oh, yeah.
She's blowing up recently. And we had this conversation around her friends, her female friends, who are also higher earners, and how a lot of men, we associate our kind of self-worth with our net worth and how much money we bring or how we can provide for our families. And when we do that too often, when we're so tied to our self-worth with our net worth, all of a sudden, a lot of these guys, when they're around other females that are earning more than them, they don't really know what to do. They get uncomfortable. Don't know how exactly. They're completely uncomfortable. They're completely out of their comfort zone because they don't know how they can add value into the relationship, even though there's millions of ways, because they've always associated how much money they make based on how much value they have in the dating marketplace and what they can provide for families. So I think it's an important one. I think a lot of guys can relate to that. So how would you advise people to separate those things?
Well, I think this really stems from how they grew up and how they saw maybe their parents' relationship and the environment that they grew up in and the friendships that they had. Because it breeds an insecurity where you go, well, the way I'm going to succeed is by looking a certain way, having a certain job, making a certain income. And like we mentioned, that never leads to a content life. It just leads to this empty chase that's a very fleeting feeling. And I think centering your life around those things is a very toxic way to live. And I want you to have a great career and income, but I want you to do it for you. And so you should be your biggest competition, not the people around you. And I think we've become obsessed with using our friends as sort of the sounding board of how we're doing in life to go, well, I'm doing better than they are. And it's so much easier. You can always find someone who's doing better than you. You can always find someone who's doing worse than you. So it's not really a good scoreboard at the end of the day. And I do think once you find a spouse that aligns with your goals and your values and you build a family, it just changes your perspective. It changes your goals. It changes your mindset. And I think a lot of that just comes with age and maturity and time. Now, we meet plenty of people who are, dudes in their 40s who are acting like children. And I also meet plenty of 18-year-olds who are some of the most mature people I know with a great head on their shoulders. And it's largely due to how they were raised and their parents and what they were taught growing up, because we know more is caught than taught. So whatever you saw from your family upbringing, the function, the dysfunction, all of it, that will affect you. And so you've got to do the deep work to go, okay, where is this insecurity coming from? Why am I so obsessed with having this thing, this type of car or this truck or this income? Where does that stem from? Oh, well, I saw that's how my dad had status, and that's what success meant to him, and he instilled that in me. Well, some of this we got to put down. We got to put the baggage down. That might mean counseling. It might mean therapy. It might mean getting ourselves in a better friend group. And all of that, you're sort of changing this paradigm from toxicity to a place of contentment, humility, gratitude. Those are the character traits I think we should be aiming at. And that helps us step away from sort of this very social facade life we've propped up for ourselves.
Yeah, no, agreed. I mean, this is something I'm still working on. But while we're here, I guess I want to go into money and love and kind of the relationship with money when it involves our actual partners and how we can talk more about money with open communication. When it comes to talking about finances with your significant other, whether you're in a serious relationship or whether you're entering a marriage, what are some questions that you should ask each other to make sure you're on the same page when it comes to money? Because money is, I still think it's one of the top 2 or 3 reasons for divorce. Like my parents mostly got divorced for money reasons. Obviously, there was other things, but it's a big topic when it comes to separation because people don't talk about it. What can we do to have this open communication? What are questions that we should ask our partners?
That's a good one. We found that money is always just a symptom. And so it's never really the root thing. It just points to something deeper in our hearts. And it's hard to talk about money without talking about what you value and who you are as a person and who you want to be. I mean, your bank account really is a reflection of your life. And where you spend your money, where you spend your time, your energy, that really is a reflection of who you are now and where you're going. So I think it's a really good test to just look at your own bank account and go, what do I really value? Is it just stuff and going out? Or am I investing for the future? Am I actively paying off debt? Am I, paying for experiences that really mean something to me? And so I think some good questions to ask in a relationship. Number one, for some people, they're obsessed with talking about money. Maybe they follow the Ramsey plan and it's just something very, it's very natural to them. You have to realize not everyone is wired that way. Money can also be triggering. It can, set things off in people accidentally because of their own trauma and baggage and shame and mistakes in the way they grew up. So I think approaching it delicately at first, you don't need to ask how much you make. That's really irrelevant. The question is, or even how much debt you have. That can come further along in the relationship. The interesting, deeper question is, hey, what were your worldviews around money growing up? How did your parents view money? What are your own personal values around debt and wealth? And what are your personal goals? That's much more interesting because I think that's much more telling than a current status of income or debt levels. Because truthfully, those things will and can change. But if their values are, I want to rack up as much debt as possible and leverage it, and your values are, I want to be completely debt free, well, that is probably not going to work out in a relationship if that's where they think stand and it's not going to change. And that to me is a red flag that you should kind of go, all right, pause. I need to dig into this and find out what's the heart behind it. Sometimes it's just a lack of financial literacy and they just don't know a different path. And therefore it might take some education. It might take some swaying to go, hey, I became debt free. I found it's a great way to live. And they go, great. I want to work that plan. Tell me more about it. So I think kind of bringing them into the conversation versus attacking and using that money as a weapon is the right approach. And a lot of people use it as a weapon and they want to feel better than the other person and they use income as a weapon as well. And they go, well, I'm making more than them, so here's what I'm bringing to the table. That's a toxic way to view a relationship, and it's not. I've never seen a relationship that's healthy with that mindset.
Yeah, you made a good point about the quantity perspective of it's not about how much money you make, because that will change as you grow together, as especially if you guys are still young. But the values, it might not change, right? Doesn't matter if you're gonna make a lot of money, but you're, very materialistic. Let's say you like to buy fancy things. That's only gonna expand. It's only gonna exponentially grow as you start to make more money, or hurt yourself if you start to get into debt. So that's a great point. What are okay, so this is an interesting one. So I read this study that there's such thing as financial cheating, which I didn't know about until like 2 weeks ago. And I read that 52% couples say that financial cheating is at least as bad as physical cheating. which blew my mind. I'm like, what is physical cheating? First of all, if you can explain that. And what are the ways that you can overcome it if you heard or found out that someone is financially cheating?
Yeah, so we all know, cheating in the traditional sense is there was some romantic infidelity. They saw another person behind the back. There was, there's really a loss of trust there, a breach of trust. And the same thing happens with money. There's financial infidelity. And we just took a call yesterday on the Ramsey show, and they called in and said, my husband is hiding this from me. He went into debt behind my back and didn't tell me. He didn't disclose all of this debt in our marriage. We've been married 9 years now. And he hasn't really come clean with all of these things happening behind the scenes. And so when you have that lack of transparency, lack of accountability, broken trust, you can't have a healthy relationship. Whether that's on the romance side or the financial side, you simply can't have a healthy relationship if trust isn't at the crux of it. And that's what we find that's why we call it financial infidelity. It really is a form of infidelity. And it's hard to rebuild that trust. It can be broken instantaneously, and it can take months or even years to rebuild. And that takes a lot of work as a couple. And that's why we tell people to combine bank accounts, because it's much harder to have that financial infidelity if both of you are on the same page with the same transparency and accountability of what's going on in the bank account, what's going on in the budget. And we find that the more complicated you make your financial life, the more bank accounts here and there, and he has his and I have mine, and it's his money and my money, and I do what I want. He doesn't tell me. That usually it starts with selfishness and it ends with deceit in most cases. We have not found that to be a healthy way to manage money. The healthiest couples I know that I've seen, they combine their bank accounts, they have the same goals, they're aligned, and it creates sort of a barrier against this infidelity.
What do you mean combined bank accounts? So are you for people when they're, let's say, married or in a very serious relationship to just have one bank account, or should both have their individual ones and then you have a joint bank account? What's the advice that you're sharing there?
Yeah, when we say combined bank accounts, we're talking about one joint checking account that everything comes in and out of. And I know this is probably one of our most controversial takes here at Ramsey, considering a lot of people, you've heard, well, there should be his account, her account, the one for shared bills, and then this one over here for savings. I think it's wise to have a high yield savings account for your emergency fund that you both have access to, and maybe some other savings accounts for sinking funds, maintenance, repairs, a vacation, a car upgrade fund, all of that. You can have separate savings accounts for those. But I think everything should be in both spouses' names, and you only do this once you're legally married. Yeah. And part of that is an emotional, spirit, relational thing, but there's another part that's a legal thing, and you don't want to combine your financial world with someone that you're not married to. Again, I took another call on the Ramsey show yesterday, and this guy was in a relationship for 6 years. They were playing house. They had moved in together, but his name was on the mortgage and hers wasn't. And so he ended up having to evict her, and she had put in $100,000. And now she's wondering, how do I get that money back? Because I'm not legally an owner of the house. And you can see very quickly how this gets very complicated and messy when you combine your life with someone that you're not married to. You don't have the legal protections, and there's something special about becoming one when you're married, the sanctity of that, and then combining your life as well. And that involves having a joint checking account. So when my wife and I got married 5 years ago, I had my checking account. She closed hers down. We transferred the money, and I created a joint checking account from that same account. So we added her name to it. It's now a joint account. We have that one account. We have a budget. And guess what? She has not lost her independence. She has a fun money line item for Whitney, and I have a fun money line item for George. And we talk about what the amount's going to be each month, and she can spend it and go do self-care and get her nails done or go out, whatever she wants to do. And I do what I want with it. And obviously there's, moral boundaries. We're not going to do something unethical with this money. But I found that there's no lack of, personal identity with this type of life. And the only thing it creates is more unity. We're communicating better. We have less money fights because we know where every single dollar is going. We've agreed upon it as the month begins. And I think it's simply the best way to live.
Whew, okay. I can see why this is controversial. It's a lot. I want to.
Well, and truthfully, this is grandma's ways of handling money, and I think as we've gotten more, I guess less conservative of a culture, it's sort of become this we want to keep our independence. What I found is that that doesn't always end with a healthier relationship. We can't have our cake and eat it too. And so when you get married, there is a loss of independence. I don't think there's a loss of identity, but there's a sort of co-ownership and co-management and co-mingling of your entire life. And I think most people, we just have a selfishness inside us as humans where we push against any of that.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I can see two counter arguments. I can see the argument for you of what you're saying, which is when everything is combined into one thing, you're forced to communicate, as you should in a marriage, about money, about what you're spending, and there's no hidden little financial cheating that could potentially be going on because you have three bank accounts, one each, and then a separate combined one. It's all just transparent. It's all one together. That makes sense. I've seen the other part where when my parents had money issues, when we moved from Korea to Canada, my mom had to transfer all of her money into my dad's bank account. While they both had access, the communication wasn't there, which happens for a lot of families in marriages or partners in marriages. And it led to more of a financial abusive relationship, which kind of led to the divorce. So this is all assuming that people have the ability to communicate very transparently, fairly, and openly about money. So are there prerequisites to doing this? Meaning you should be able to communicate about money first before you go into having a joint account where all of your money is in one place? Because I could see both arguments for that.
Yeah, I think you're right. The prerequisite is, this happens during the dating phase, the engagement phase. You've got to be aligned. You've got to have that communication about money and values and goals. And if you don't have that, you're not ready to be married, let alone combine bank accounts. And to your credit, there are moments and times where there is financial abuse and there's someone with an addiction issue or a spending issue. And you have to take away, almost like a toddler and go, you don't have access to the card anymore because you can't be trusted. And the other piece of this is we recommend no credit cards, always using a debit card and cash. And that also removes the ability for one spouse to go into debt. It's one thing to go, we ran out of money. It's another to go, we're $10,000 in debt because I racked up the bill on the credit card. And so there's one safeguard you have built in there. But I think you're right. There are times when we go, hey, this person is not behaving financially with money, and therefore you do need to cut ties. And, people also think, well, if I have my account separate, then I'll be safe in a divorce. The legal system does not see it like that. They don't care if it was a joint account or a separate account. When you're married, it's marital assets, and it's going to be split accordingly, regardless of whose account was on whose name. And so the judge will decide all of that and mediation and all that sad stuff that we have to deal with. But there's no real protection just because your name is not on an account. Now, you can do prenups if there's some big assets and, there's a big discrepancy in wealth. That can be a wise thing to do, to say, listen, I'm coming into the marriage with this big asset. I want to make sure that if something were to go wrong in the marriage, there was a problem that arose, that this asset is protected. And that's an okay thing to do. I think for most people, prenups are not necessary because most people aren't coming into a marriage saying, well, I'm bringing in $3 million in assets and you're coming in broke. That's usually not the case. And so that's all kind of roped into that. But I think at the heart of it, there's a fear of we want to protect ourselves from hurt, from financial pain. And that stems into all these kind of byproducts, which is, do I do the joint account or do I do the 3 different accounts? And I think for the people that follow the Ramsey plan, that means you're getting on the same page. We're going to get out of debt. We're going to do a budget. The joint account is the way to go for the healthiest marriage.
Yeah. So prenup, just go back to prenups. So you are okay with prenups. Is there particular cases where prenups are more favorable, like when one person is coming into the marriage more financially successful? And if that's the case, which I know is not the norm, but if that is the case where the woman or the man is much more financially successful, should they still have a joint account in that case?
Yes, I don't think that affects the joint account, but I do think if there's a large discrepancy in net worth and wealth and assets, that's where it might make sense to bring up that prenup agreement and say, hey, this is what I'm doing. Here's why I'm doing it. And we say it's not because of a lack of trust with the spouse. It's more to protect both parties from crazy family. Because when there's a split, all of a sudden things get very messy and family wants to get involved, especially if there's a family business or there's a lot of real estate assets and things of that nature. It can be wise to protect yourself from crazy outside of the spousal situation. So it's less about a lack of trust and a sort of a gloom and doom mindset of, well, it's all going to go down, I got to protect me. And it's more about making sure that you set yourselves up to avoid chaos in the long run. And so for most people, like I mentioned, if you make 70 and the other person makes 50 and you both have a little bit of debt, this is not a prenup situation. We're talking about one person makes $1 million, the other person makes 40,000, or one person has 7 real estate properties and the other person has nothing. That might be where you want to set an agreement up. And again, both of you need to be on the same page about what we're doing and why we're doing it and the spirit of it.
Got it. Well, enough about the doom and gloom about divorce and relationships.
So much doom and gloom.
So much doom and gloom. I want to actually talk to you about more digging deeper into the baby steps, how we can get people out of debt, how we can help people earn more income. I want to start by talking about this quote by Charlie Munger, who was the right-hand man of Warren Buffett at Berkshire Hathaway. And he said in the late 1990s, this quote in one of the shareholder letters, he says, "I don't care what you have to do, even if it means walking everywhere and not eating anything that wasn't purchased with a coupon, find a way to get your hands on 100,000. I think it was talking about the power of compound interest. So this is also in the 1990s, so that's probably around 200,000 today. What is the significance of what he's saying for people that may not understand around this number particularly, and also the power of compound interest?
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't heard that quote, but I just recently did a video on my YouTube channel. I believe the title was Why Your Net Worth Explodes at $100,000. And the point of the video is to show you, hey, here's one reason to get to that $100,000 benchmark. It's not a magical milestone. It's just when you have that much money sitting there invested, growing with compound interest, let's say in the stock market, and let's say you have an average return of 8 or 9 or 10%. Well, the numbers start to change once you have $100,000 invested, because 10% of $100,000, you're talking $10,000. And now you have $110,000. Well, now you're making 10% on the $110,000. So that's $11,000 that year. And you can see the number starts to grow and grow to where once you have $1 million, well, now that 10% turns into $100,000 in a year if you had that 10% return. And so that's the power of compound growth. The first 100,000 was a grind to get to, but the next 100,000 might take 7 years. The next 100,000 after that might take 4 years. The next 100,000 might take 2 years. And so the number starts to dwindle as you get that power of compound interest working for you, where it's simply your money making money. It's not really a magic trick, but it's the beauty of capital appreciation. You know, those same shares that you had in that portfolio in a mutual fund or an index fund, the shares have increased in value. And now those shares increasing in value have more growth. And so it just sort of stacks on top of each other. And so it's a really beautiful thing. And it encourages people to invest consistently, to keep their eye on the ball and realize that, man, from 25 to 35, I may not see much growth at all. From 35 to 45 years old, I'm going to see some numbers start to change. From 45 to 65, it's going to blow my mind how this money has grown just because I haven't touched it. I just left it alone. I added to it. I'm not jumping in and out of the roller coaster getting hurt. That's how people actually build wealth. That's the secret sauce.
Yeah, it tells you a lot about human psychology too, because I think humans, by nature, our brains are wired to think more linearly. It's hard for us to think about exponential growth, which is why it was hard for us to predict things like the pandemic and how COVID was going to spread so fast. And us not really being able to see how fast AI is going to be catching up with, how fast it's going to be advancing. And even when you see Warren Buffett's net worth, it's kind of like, it wasn't that impressive and up until he was like 55 or 60. Obviously, it was a lot of money. But then you see like in his 60s and 70s, it just skyrockets. And it's mind-blowing how that works. So it's not as exciting initially for people that are thinking about it. But when you see other people that have increased their wealth through compound, as Einstein said, it's like the eighth wonder of the world. So I think it's an interesting point that you mentioned around how powerful it is. Now, to get there, I want to focus on that number, and I want to talk about debt, getting rid of our debt, controlling our expenses, increasing our income, and side hustles. Starting with debt first, I know for you, you're very well known for being able to pay off that $40,000 of consumer debt. Is that something that, from the Ramsey solution, that everyone should focus on first with any sort of extra income that they have first? And why should they pay off their debt first instead of, let's say, investing it in the crypto meme coins or the next idea that they have?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of people I found, they're doing a lot of good things, but they're doing too much at once. So they're trying to pay off some debt, but they're trying to get some money in the emergency fund. They're trying to invest. They're trying to save up for a down payment, and they're not making much progress on any of it. And so what we found is that the real secret sauce here is focused intensity. And so if you can focus on one thing with all of your energy, all of your strength, like paying off debt, it happens a lot faster. And people that follow the baby steps, they pay off all of their consumer debt on average in 18 to 24 months. That's amazing, because most people will hang on to debt for their whole adult life and go, I wonder why I wasn't able to invest. I invested 3% up to the match, and man, there's not enough retirement here in America. And I'm going, yeah, you invested a measly amount while hanging on to debt and living beyond your means and then wondering why you retired broke. This is not a crazy math problem. And so what we found is that once people get rid of all of their debt in that 18 to 24 month period, they can easily free up $500, $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 that they can now use to invest, to save for their next goals, to save that 100,000. And so that's the power of paying off debt. It's not just this like anti-debt. We have the biblical principles of the borrower is slave to the lender, Proverbs says, and nowhere is debt spoken of positively in the Bible. And so it just holds you back. It uses that very intense slave language to go, you have a monkey on your back that you've got to get off if you want to build wealth. And I found that debt is the biggest killer to that. And the problem is we've normalized the car payment. We've normalized the student loans in the 6-figure range. We've normalized having a little credit card balance that you're working on paying off. And that turns into normalizing everything else in your life with giant mortgages, and let's take the HELOC and the second mortgage and let's leverage even more debt. And I found the people that build wealth with peace, they're doing it more slowly and they're doing it with less risk and they're doing it debt-free. And that's the way I've done it. And that allowed me to go from 40,000 in debt, broke, to net worth millionaire in under 10 years. As a W-2 employee, I was not an entrepreneur. I wasn't making hundreds of thousands of dollars. I just simply got out of debt, stayed like that, and invested 15% into my future, paid off my house on a reasonable mortgage, and then started investing even more. And so that's, and it's along with my wife. And so I think having a spouse that's aligned and also has an income, that is a wealth hack in and of itself. And it's harder to do when you're single. That's just a fact of life. It's going to take longer. You got 2 people, it's better than 1. And so those are some of the pieces of the formula, and it's a lot simpler than people think, but it also takes kind of getting the blinders on and not getting distracted by all of the meme coins and the things that you could be doing and doing 19 things at once. It's becoming debt-free. And that debt snowball method is the most powerful because we found that personal finance is 80% behavior, only 20% head knowledge. And the debt snowball is all about behavior, motivation, progress, momentum, and getting that quick win to keep going.
Fascinating. So when you were paying off your debt, were you 100% in? If you had $200 left from your income that you had, or $2,000, whatever it might be, were you just putting all of it into paying off debt? You weren't investing at all because you wanted to be laser focused on that?
Yeah. And that, again, is, people will get angry saying, I can't believe he didn't invest. He invested $0 for those 18 months. Listen, if I was investing, it would have slowed down my debt payoff. And I think what I've been able to do beyond the 18 months, freeing up all of that income to invest, is way better. Because most people invest 3% and they're all stoked about it. But what if you could invest 5 times that? What if you could invest 15%? And they go, well, how are you going to do that? I don't have the money. And then I go, well, what are your debt payments add up to? Like, well, my car payment's $500, my student loan payment's $400, $100 on the credit card. Okay, that's $1,000 right there. If you just freed that up, you could invest $1,000 a month more than you are now. And I think that mentality starts to shift things. And it does take sacrifice. Every extra $100, $200, $500, I was throwing at the debt. And when you have an aggressive goal, you're willing to do whatever it takes. So I was doing side hustles. I was driving for Uber and Lyft. I was doing marketing consulting. I was building websites. I was doing music gigs. Any skill that I had that I could turn into money, I was doing it. And that's on top of cutting my expenses. And so I would cook at home instead of going out. I would wait for lean cuisines to go on sale, 5 for $10, because I knew that $2 meal could sustain me and I could do it real cheap. And it was those kinds of decisions and habits that got me through those 18 months. And 18 months may seem like a long time, but it's going to go by like that. You're going to look back and go, I would do that all over again, because now I have the next 18 years of freedom and no debt payments to build wealth. And so our plan, 10 million people have now gone through it, and it actually works. And that's the difference between our plan and the guy on TikTok telling you that you've got to leverage debt out of your eyeballs, and here's why Dave Ramsey's wrong, as he, makes videos in his mom's basement. It just doesn't track. And I get to see the reality of people sacrificing, working hard. Our plan has 0 life hacks. Like, yes, we have a course to show you the plan, but it is not get rich quick. It is get rich slow. And I love that, because when you get rich slow, you actually keep the money you make, and it changes your mindset. Because people that want to get rich quick are about to get burned quick. They usually lose that money just as fast as they earn it.
What was the most interesting side hustle that you've had? Or at least the one that was most financially rewarding for you?
The financially rewarding side hustle, the most lucrative one I did in a year, was my marketing consulting work. And I was a marketer professionally here at Ramsey. So I was doing social media work. I was doing email marketing. And I realized that I could help entrepreneurs and podcasters launch their brands, launch their books, build their websites. And as long as you have more tech know-how than they do, you're qualified. And a lot of people think, well, I don't have the skill set. I'm not a web developer. I'm not a professional designer, but I understand how branding works. I knew how to, formulate a tweet. And so you need to find those people who need that kind of help. And you can step in and say, hey, for $25 an hour on nights and weekends, I'll help you do X, Y, Z. And that's exactly what I did. Every night and weekend, that's what I was doing. And I was a single guy, so I didn't have to worry about too much. And that's the time. A lot of people think, well, now I'm single, I'm going to enjoy my life and go out and party or whatever. And I found that when you're single, you have the most time at your disposal. And once you get married and you have a family, it's going to be harder to sacrifice. So I was very okay with sacrificing in the now so that I could have more time with my family and enjoy the experiences later on. And so there's a lot of delayed gratification that I think we're missing in today's society, regardless of the generation. This is not a slam against Gen Z or millennials. I think every generation has a bunch of slackers and a bunch of people who have no delayed gratification. It's all about instant gratification. And then you have people in every generation who are willing to put in the work and go, I'm going to grind this out. I'm going to do it the slow way, no shortcuts. And those are the people that have long-term success and long-term wealth.
Yeah, no, and I can see, just going back to your point about why it's so much easier when you have a significant other that's on the same page as you. Because I got to tell you, being single is not cheap. I mean, if you live in LA, let's say you go from Santa Monica to downtown, that's like $80 right there just to get there on a first date. And then you pay for the date. That's probably another $100. You go back.
Oh, dating. I mean, that's a big one.
It's not easy, folks, being single if you're in a expensive city like that. So it's
Is this your pitch, Sean? Is this how you do it on the show? You're like, listen, it's not easy. If you want to help out, reach out to your boy.
Yeah, come to Brazil.
Are you single?
Yeah. I'm single right now. Yeah.
Okay. I do think there's a beauty to that. You're much more flexible. You can do what you want, and you can work as hard as you want without having to sort of report back and go, sorry, honey, I'm going to be working my third side hustle tonight. And so there's a beauty in that freedom and independence while you have it. And there's also a beauty in having that spouse and having that life partner who you're working towards something with and building a life together. And so I feel like there's a lot of flack on either side of either, the married people dogging the single people dogging the married people. And I just want us to all play nice and go, there's benefits, there's pros and cons to all of it, and do what's right for you in this season.
Yeah, it's definitely a season for me. What I have noticed though, even for me, but when you study a lot of the most successful people, they found their partners pretty early in life. They got married with one partner and they built something together. And this is across many, many successful people that I've noticed. So I do see the benefits of how it can impact your career, your financial success when you have a partner that's aligned financially. So I'm actually for finding a partner that's aligned, and but I see benefits in both for sure, so that we can please everyone for sure.
Absolutely. And like I mentioned, we had dual income, no kids. Then we became dinkwads, dual income, no kids with a dog. And then it was with dogs, plural,
Dogs.
2 French bulldogs. And then 8 months ago, we had our first kid, a beautiful baby girl named Mia.
Wow!
And
Congrats.
I met my wife at Ramsey Solutions. And so Whitney had an amazing 9-year career here. And just 2 weeks ago, she retired to be a full-time stay-at-home mom with our daughter. And so her prior
Congrats, man.
CEO is Dave Ramsey. Her new CEO is even tougher, an 8-month-old. And so, but those were the decisions we got to make because we set ourselves up financially. It wasn't a financial decision for her to stay home. It was just an emotional one for her to leave her career and the place that she loves and, the social atmosphere, all of that. And it made it so much sweeter that we didn't have to worry about the money because we had worked so hard early on in our life to get rid of all of our debt, to get rid of the mortgage payment so that we could have the flexibility and live off one income. And that, I think, is one of the most beautiful things people forget is that following this Ramsey plan and becoming debt-free, it gives you more options. It gives you more margin. It gives you more freedom to do the things that you want to do in life. And money becomes a tool instead of an obstacle.
Yeah, no, that's a beautiful thing, man. I'm so happy for you guys. It's only 9 months. I mean, I had no idea.
Yeah, it's still fresh.
No kidding. No kidding. So going back, so let's say you've paid off your debt, and I think some of us kind of mistake or maybe confuse the difference between good debt and bad debt. I'd be curious to get your stance on it. Do you believe in good debt at all? Do you believe there's any such thing as good debt to help grow your income or anything like that? And what is the difference between good debt and bad debt?
Well, traditionally, good debt has been seen in culture to mean, am I using debt to purchase an asset versus a liability? So am I buying something that's going up in value, like real estate or an investment, or am I using debt to purchase a luxury item like a car that's going to go down in value? That's traditionally how it's seen. My controversial take is that the only good debt is the debt that's been paid off. And so the only debt we don't yell at people for is a 15-year fixed rate conventional mortgage. But otherwise, we have an anti-debt stance. Even Dave would say, I'd rather you pay cash for the home, but because I know that can feel impossible. If you get a 15-year mortgage and you pay it off in 15 years or less, you're going to be fine. You're going to do okay. You're going to retire with dignity. And so I don't believe there's good debt, and I've experienced both sides of the coin. I've had debt and I haven't had debt, and I have zero regrets. I have zero need or desire to acquire more debt. It has not been a blessing in my life. And there's some folks who truly they're able to build wealth while leveraging debt. But I think for 99.99%, it's not going to work. It's going to add stress into your life, mentally, emotionally, financially, and it's not worth it. The juice ain't worth the squeeze when it comes to debt and risk and leverage. And I'm able to build wealth without it. And once you realize your greatest wealth building tool is your income, it's not the banks loaning you a 3 or 4 or 7% loan. It's your ability to go make income and then live on less than you make and use the difference to invest, to build wealth, to give generously. It's not all about, how much can I make on the spread? I think that mentality has gotten a lot of people in trouble, and it's going to get even worse as social media is more rampant, as AI gets more rampant, as crypto gets more rampant. We're going to see more fraud, more schemes and scams, and buy my course, and I've got the magic ticket to get rich quick. And I found that there's 3 stooges of wealth building. It's fear, greed, and pride. And most people that want to get rich quick, they have one of those emotions that is driving these decisions, and it's never led people to long-term peace and wealth.
Does credit cards fall into bad debt as well? Is there a certain point where having a credit card for someone that has paid off their debt, is there any point, like, do you have a credit card or are you also only on debit card?
I only have one debit card to my name. That is it. I closed up my credit cards back in 2013, paid them off, never looked back. And I talk about this in my book, Breaking Free from Broke. I had devoted a whole chapter to credit cards because there was so much to cover. The history, how we got here, the objections that I've heard, the 8 sort of character archetypes when it comes to credit cards, from the rewards redeemer to the perfect spender to the world traveler. And, people have created entire brands around credit cards. And I'm sure you've had people on the show who are the credit card hacker types, and here's how to use points effectively, and here's how to, sort of beat the system. And I've found that there's so much more peace instead of beating the system, you just buck the system. You just go, nah, I'm good. I'm not going to be a rat in their maze chasing their next, value redemption, devaluation scheme. And they just changed it from points to miles. And I don't even know what 100,000 miles means. And they can have blackout dates and there's redemption rules. I found it so much easier to go, how much is the flight? $500? Okay. We'll just budget for that and we'll save up over a few months to save that up. And then you can do your own research and you're not beholden to a single company or credit card or lounge at the airport. And you just go, we're just going to budget for this and pay cash. And I found that autonomy and agency I have over my life, instead of giving it to the hands of a credit card company, has been a huge blessing. And we also know that credit card debt is at an all-time high. We're at $1.2 trillion now in credit card debt. And so most people that think they're credit card people, no one opens one up thinking, I'm going to rack up a balance. And yet the majority of Americans, half of Americans, are racking up a balance, unable to pay it off every month. And so I think in culture, we'd be way better off dropping the credit cards, dropping the games, the marketing from these companies, and just going, I'm going to use money I actually have right now instead of using someone else's money and paying it off later. We would make very different spending decisions.
Yeah, it's interesting how the debt economy works in the US and how it's different from certain parts around the world. Like here in Latin America, whether it's Argentina or Brazil, the idea of having credit cards, it's not even a thing. Like people don't know, they know conceptually what it is, but it's just not common because the interest rates are so high. And what they do have here is they have quotas, which is kind of like Afterpay or Klarna, which is the US version, where you can pay, let's say $100 in 12 payments. And you can do that in the grocery stores. It's all set up within the financial systems all across. And it's just so much more common there, which is kind of like the credit card model. And it makes me think about how that changes investing and how people decide to invest. So for example, Brazil, what's different about the US is that Brazil guarantees 11% if you were to put it into a bank here in Brazil, which is wild. And inflation is around 3 to 4%. So people are guaranteed to get 6-7% roughly to just hold their money in the bank, because there needs to be some incentive by the government or the central bank for people to keep the money in the bank. But what happens is a consequence of that is that because people can make money through investing in just keeping their money in the bank, a lot of people aren't investing in the stock market. So the stock market activity is a lot lower than normal, and people are willing to take less risks because of how much guaranteed money there is from banks. So it kind of affects the whole economy. And the US is a little bit different, obviously, because we have now 5% treasury rates. But assuming people have paid off their debts and now they're thinking about wealth creation and investing in the US, how should people think about their risk profile? Like, what are the questions that they should ask? They have 5,000, 10,000, and they could put it all into meme coins in crypto, but they haven't thought about the idea that, like, if you lose it, you're going to be devastated. So what are the questions that we should ask as a foundation to know how much risk they should be taking?
Yeah, that's a good one. Well, obviously age, comes into play here. If you're 20 versus 60, your risk tolerance is going to look different. And the older you get, the more risk averse you probably get. And what we have found, interestingly enough, is that if you have a heavier equity focus versus bonds, in the long term, you're going to end off way better. So if you have 100% in stocks, and I'm not talking single stocks, I'm saying you have stocks inside of mutual funds and index funds, so well diversified, 90 to 200 different companies in one of these funds, and you stick to that over the long haul, you're going to end up seeing an amazing return. And the S&P 500 is a great example. It's about 10 to 11, even 12%, depending on, what metrics you're looking at over the long haul. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to see 10 to 12% every single year. Some years it's going to be down 25, 30%. Some years it might be up 25, 30%. And so what we look at is a long-term horizon. You don't want to invest for the short term. That's where you end up getting burned. So for short-term savings goals, we say high-yield savings account is your best bet right now. We're seeing rates about 5%, like you mentioned with the treasury rates, 5% in a high-yield savings account. Put your emergency fund there, put your car upgrade there, your down payment if you're going to make that purchase in the next few years. And then for long-term investing, there's tax advantage ways to invest that are much better than, the next meme coin. And that means the Roth 401k, a Roth IRA, using after-tax money that grows tax-free is one of the best, legal loopholes out there. And what that means is if you have $2 million sitting in a Roth 401k or a Roth IRA when you retire, that's $2 million that Uncle Sam has already touched. So you can use $2 million as if it was net income. And you can peel off a piece of that to then live your life and do all the experiences and things you want to do. And the pushback we get on investing is, well, I don't want to wait till I'm 60. So what people do because of that mentality is they do really stupid stuff in the meantime to where I'm like, well, you're going to be extra broke at 60 and good luck having any life in the meantime because you're going to be so stressed out watching your crypto portfolio do this up and down 24/7, which is just too stressful of a life. And so in the meantime, if you want to invest outside of retirement, you can do that with a brokerage account. Just get a non-retirement brokerage account, invest in index funds, and you're going to be just fine. And you can build sort of a bridge account that can tide you over from, let's say, 50 to 60 if you want to retire early until you can tap into those accounts without penalties or taxes. And so it's really that simple. I don't have any investments outside of the mutual funds in my 401k, an IRA, and my paid off primary home. That's it. It's that simple. I don't have complicated investments. And the more complicated it gets, the more I run away from it. And I talk about all these investment traps in a whole chapter in the book of Breaking Free from Broke to help people understand what they are and why you should stay away. And there's about 20 of them, and there was more to cover. And so it just goes to show you how much noise there is out there when it comes to investing, but it really is simple. Choose mutual funds and index funds with a long-term track record that are well diversified, and you will be just fine.
How would you advise these percentage allocations when someone has, let's say, $5,000 or $10,000 to spend? What percentage of it should be, assuming the treasury rate's at 5%, what percentage of that should be going to those safe treasuries? What percent of that should be going to the long-term ETFs or the stock portfolios? And what percentage of that should be going to anything else that you recommend?
Yeah, in terms of percentages, when you get out of debt and you have that emergency fund of 3 to 6 months of expenses, that's your time to invest 15% of your gross household income. So if the total household income is $100,000, you would be investing $15,000 into these tax-advantaged accounts. And the strategy here that we use, it's 5 words. Anyone can memorize this. Match beats Roth beats traditional. So if you have a match through your employer, let's say it's a 3% match. You invest 3%, they're going to give you 3%. Well, that's a 100% rate of return. So we're going to take that free money immediately. Once we've maxed out the match, then we can move on to any Roth options we have. And a lot of people have these options now through their employer. And that's where I mentioned you're using after-tax dollars. You're not getting a tax, it's not a deductible when you go to file your tax return. But what that does is you're using after-tax dollars, which means you've already paid the taxes, and that money's now going to grow tax-free. And that's a beautiful thing. So take advantage of all the Roth that you can, even if that's just a Roth IRA outside of your employer. Once you've exhausted the Roth options, you can go back to any traditional options like a 401k that's not a Roth and contribute there until you hit 15%. Any extra dollars would go toward saving for college, if you can, for the kids, and then applying it to the mortgage principal to get your house paid off early. Once the house is paid off and you have no mortgage payment, well, now you can invest way more because you just freed up a mortgage payment. So now you can invest 20, 30, 40, 50% of your income into retirement, maxing out your accounts, into non-retirement accounts like a brokerage and creating a bridge. Maybe you want to buy some investment property with cash and you might have the margin to be able to do that over years. And so that really is the strategy that I use, that millions of people have used. And it's so simple. You don't have to overcomplicate it. And as long as you have your sinking funds for savings, that's what you were talking about with, hey, what if we need to save up for things? What percentage should we put in? Well, it depends. If you have a roof repair that's going to be $10,000 and that's going to happen, 12 months from now, well, we need to save up and make sure that we've got that, $900 set aside every month into that separate side savings account. And so you kind of get a feel for what life's going to throw at you in a given year, and it stops becoming this life coming at you, and you start becoming more proactive.
Yeah. I don't know if this is a question you'll answer, like in terms of the accuracy of it, but one of the questions that I had and still have sometimes as I grow up into my financial journey is how to measure where I'm at in terms of my financial journey compared to what benchmarks I should have based on my age. So are there financial net worth benchmarks of what a 25-year-old should have saved up in terms of their liquid net worth or financial net worth in general versus, let's say a 30-year-old, a 40-year-old, a 50-year-old? Are there general benchmarks that we should aim for just so that people can at least have something to work towards, or even if they're there or higher, they can feel, okay, I'm better than I thought I was, just because I think a lot of people don't know. Most people don't talk about money around their community as much.
Yeah, there is a lot of gray area as to where, things should be. And we talked earlier about sort of the comparisons and how toxic those can be. But I do think there's a healthy level of just going, am I on track for my own goals? And how do I know? And there's so many unknowns in the world. We don't know what inflation is going to do and what the stock markets will do, where our accounts will be. And to me, that's one more reason to stay debt-free and invest that 15% and get the house paid off and begin investing more after that. I'd rather have too much versus not enough. And I've done a lot of videos on my YouTube channel because they perform well and people love to hear about it. I've set some of those benchmarks to go, hey, here's the average 401k by age, here's the average net worth, and here's sort of my scoring system as to, I think you're doing pretty good if you have this much net worth or this much 401k by this age. I'm very careful when I do those videos because I don't want people to feel hopeless if they're not there. And so in every video, I'm always like, hey, if you're not there, if you got an F or a D and you're not happy with where you're at, it's okay. I'm glad you're watching this channel. I'm here to help you build wealth the right way and increase that score over time. So it's less about a certain number and it's more about, are you increasing your score over time and are you building that net worth? I think the net worth is the best scoreboard comparatively to your credit score or more, sort of luxury flexes in your life. It's more about staying debt free, being able to purchase things in cash, living on less than you make, being on a budget, and investing consistently into the future. And you can use some wealth calculators. We have one on our website that will sort of show you what your money will turn into over time. And you can type in different rates of return and all that good stuff and sort of take a guess. And I think a fair, modest guess is an 8 to 10% return. And so if you pop in, hey, I'm investing 15%, that's, $700 a month. My income's going to go up over time. I'm going to get the house paid off. Well, I'm 25. And so at 60 or 62 or 65, that will turn into a $3 million nest egg. And then you can sort of extrapolate from that. Hey, if I got this much return and I wanted to live off this much income, that would replace my current income. That's going to be my goal I'm aiming at. And that might change over time, but I think it's good to have something you're aiming at as you begin this financial journey. And so for you, I don't know if you've thought about a certain number, and that, again, maybe that goalpost moves with time, depending on where you live and what your goals are. That's the hard part about just telling someone what they should be at. Because in Brazil, for your lifestyle and your income and your age and all of those factors, it looks different than for someone living in Idaho, making the same amount of money because there's a different cost of living. And that's the part that's hard to just put a number on as much as we want to.
Yeah, I've done the FIRE, financial independent retire early. Like there's a calculation that's pretty popular there. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but it's your annual expenses. And then I think you divide that by 3 or 4%. Obviously, it depends on the guaranteed rate of return that you can get. It's probably higher these days. So So that's like one calculation that I have done to figure out
Yeah, you
what
can take
are,
your income and multiply it by, your income that you would like, multiply it by 25, and that essentially becomes, hey, if I peeled off 4% of that, that would provide this income. So that's a simple mathematical way to look at it. And again, it depends on your risk tolerance. I think 4% is very modest. You'll never run out of money. I'm
yeah.
okay going, if I'm going to retire at 60, I'm probably not going to live to 120. So I don't need this money to last forever. I'm okay seeing it dwindle down slowly over time. And so there's a balance between depleting it versus seeing it go even higher in retirement, where you're like, I don't even need I got $10 million. When is enough enough? And that's for the person individually to decide based on the lifestyle that they want to have in retirement. And for me in my house, I want to have a great retirement. I don't want to have to worry about scrimping and saving. And some of the FIRE principles have led people to go, I retired at 35 and by 55, I'm not sure we're going to have enough because, that's a long time horizon from 35 to 90, to go, I need to have enough money in that nest egg. That can be a daunting task.
Yeah. Final question for you, George. First of all, I really appreciate you sharing all of this insightful knowledge to our audience and just sharing some of these golden nuggets. I want to make sure people get your book, Breaking Free from Broke. We're going to have that link down, but make sure people get that. It's called The Ultimate Guide to Making More Money and Less Stress. Final question for you is, I was interested in kind of your relationship with Dave Ramsey and having, gone from someone that was in debt that joined the company Ramsey Solutions. What are the most profound lessons that maybe you didn't know about money and what it can do for someone and what it means in terms of how someone perceives money from Dave that you know now?
Yeah, over 11 years here at Ramsey, there's been a lot of lessons I've learned, and getting to host the show next to Dave. And, I started as an intern, as a temp and in marketing, and now getting to be a personality and teach these principles and kind of carry this baton as one of the Ramsey personalities and succeed Dave because he knows this message is bigger than him. It's not about just Dave, the personality. It's about freedom. And that's one of the most beautiful things about Dave and the Ramsey principles that I've learned is that it's not about money. While we've been known to be this sort of personal finance company, what Dave is really about is legacy and generosity and family. And that to me, it's a much deeper goal than just building a nest egg for the sake of building a nest egg. And that's why baby step 7 is build wealth and give. And there's an interesting underpinning of these principles that I've learned from Dave, in that it's the faith underpinning. Most financial creators out there, it's sort of just like, let's build wealth and to build wealth. And for Dave, there's an idea of stewardship that's really powerful, where he believes, hey, God has given me this money as a blessing, and it's my job to manage it responsibly, to grow this money, to give it, to spend it wisely. And that totally changed the way I viewed money because it wasn't just this hoarding mentality and it wasn't just the spending mentality. There's this big giving piece of being outrageously generous. And we call those people philanthropists as they get older. When, rich people give away a lot of money, it's a wonderful thing. Now, there's also rich people who are stingy and jerks, but we find that more often than not, people didn't become rich because they're crooks. They became rich because they maybe started a business, they invested wisely, they treated people well, they served customers well, and the customer gave them a certificate of appreciation with a president's face on it. And that really helped me see money as this sort of amoral brick. You can use it to build a school, you can use it to throw through a window. And I think money has been villainized of like rich people are evil, making money is evil, building wealth is evil. And I don't believe that. I think money is simply a tool and it reflects who we are. It's a magnifying glass. And that's one of the most powerful lessons I've learned from Dave, on top of course, the baby steps, but that underpinning of, man, it's a reflection of who you are, and the things that you can do with money when debt is not an obstacle in your life just blows my mind. And he has led the charge with generosity, and it's been fun to see him behind the scenes and live out these principles. He He practices exactly what he preaches. Dave has a debit card in his wallet just like I do. We don't have a single piece of debt on this building, on this company. He runs it all at the speed of cash. And that's been a really cool thing to watch, Dave's integrity on top of the way he's influenced so many people.
Yeah. Yeah. It kind of reminds me of this hero and villain analogy, particularly around money. If you didn't grow up with money and you faced a lot of pain, a villain is someone that got hurt by the world and it wants to hurt it back. Whereas a hero got hurt by the world, but he or she never want to make anyone feel that way again. And I think that's what you guys are doing at Ramsey Solutions. So I appreciate you guys. And thanks for coming on.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Sean. It was a pleasure. Love this conversation. And if you want to connect with me, would love to hear from them at George Kamel with a K on Instagram. And of course, RamseySolutions.com. They can check out the book and all the other stuff we got going on.
Beauty. You got cut off a little bit there, but we'll have that linked up below. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys.
Thank you. That was awesome. You're doing great work, man. Keep it up.